Hi everyone, my name is Jenny and welcome back to another video. Today is a very exciting video because I'm going to be announcing a new reading project that I'll be starting here on my channel. I started to form this idea back in March of last year, around the time that I started hearing about The Old Drift by Namoli Serpell, which came out in March of 2019, and I solidified my reading list for this project a few months back. And initially I was going to just have this be kind of a personal reading project, but now that I've started this channel, obviously I want to share it with all of you. So as you've seen in the title of this video, I'm calling this my African Women Writers Reading Project, and my goal for this project is to read 6 novels written by women born in sub-Saharan Africa, although many of them no longer live there, that in some way discuss colonialism, post-colonialism, and neo-colonialism. So my interest in starting this project is threefold. The first of which is that, given that I've grown up in the American South, I feel quite fortunate that both my parents and my teachers throughout my K-12 education really emphasized the importance of me understanding and learning the history of the American South, particularly the history of slavery, and then the kind of post-slavery years of Reconstruction, Jim Crow, and then the Civil Rights Movement. That was a huge part of my K-12 education, as well as kind of my personal family education, and I feel really fortunate that I've had such great exposure to that time period. I think it's such an important time period to read about and continue to learn about as an informed American. So I've always had an interest in this history and its consequences of slavery and racism in America, as well as the impact slavery has had, not only in shaping the American South, where I call home, but also in shaping global geopolitics. Second, I have a strong interest in colonial history, particularly subaltern history, or history of those who we may not predominantly focus our history on, such as women or working class people. During my undergrad degree, I took several classes on colonial history, although the focus was on India, as that was my professor's area of expertise, including a class on women of South Asia, where we extensively discussed the specific ways in which colonialism impacted women's bodies, women's minds, women's educational opportunities, kind of all aspects of colonialism and post-colonialism and its impact on women living in India and Pakistan. Additionally, I did take another class that was focused, it was called Plagues of Empire, and it was focused on how infectious diseases and colonialism have interacted throughout history. And during that class we did have some discussion of sub-Saharan African colonialism, but it was not as expansive as I really would have liked it to be. But again, given that the professor's area of academic research was in Indian colonialism, it made sense that she was not able to provide as in-depth of a look at sub-Saharan Africa. Finally, I have a personal interest in this project because I have spent time in sub-Saharan Africa. I, during my undergrad degree, studied abroad in Tanzania for 4 months, and while I was not studying history or colonialism or literature directly, instead I was studying ecology and anthropology of Tanzania, I was constantly thinking during the program about colonialism and its impacts, as well as neo-colonialism, especially given that we were pretty much kind of perpetuating neo-colonialism in some ways, in that the program was so focused on ecotourism and cultural tourism of the region. So since that program, I have just had this fascination with better understanding Tanzanian geopolitics, East African geopolitics, and sub-Saharan African geopolitics and history more broadly. So despite my immense interest in this subject, I am by no means an expert in colonial history, and especially not an expert in colonial literature. I actually never even took an English class in college, which is somewhat, a regret of mine, but there were very few English classes that were appropriate for my level of knowledge of academic English work, as well as classes that interested me on a topic. Those two things did not really coincide ever during my college's course offerings, so that was part of the reason why I never took any English classes. But I'm hoping that this will help to supplement both that missing piece of learning and experiencing kind of coursework, if you will, that I've kind of been missing from my life since graduating from college, as well as just teaching me more about this subject that I'm really interested in. However, I do also want this to be a learning experience for myself and more for others more broadly. So I would love to have any people that have kind of more in-depth knowledge about any of the topics that I'm planning on discussing in this reading project to chime in whenever possible. In fact, when I actually told one of my in real life best friends about this project. She got super excited because her degree was in English and her undergraduate thesis was on colonial Indian women writing early novels during the period, so like late 19th century writers. And so she sent me like a whole bunch of different theory-based work on like colonial literature and like post-colonialism in literature. So if anyone has any of the like resources like that, I would love to have them sent my way. Additionally, if you are interested in like collaborating in any other ways on this project, please let me know down in the comment section below. I would love to have as many people participate as possible. So now I'm gonna go over the logistics of what I'm hoping for this reading project to accomplish, as well as the books that I am planning on having us read as our little syllabus for this project. So first, I'm planning on posting a discussion video for each book. I've chosen one book per month, starting in June and ending in December, and I plan to post that discussion video around the 15th of each month. This is where I want to have the primary discussion about that specific book, but also in the comment section, I would really appreciate, or I'm hoping that there will be some kind of interbook commentary as well that we are able to do. But again, as I said previously, if you're interested in more collaboration or want to do a read along or anything like that, please let me know in the comment section down below, and we can definitely start to kind of figure out how that might work. Second, I thought it would be beneficial for me and potentially for you if I made 5 guiding reading questions for myself when I'm reading these novels, and then to later use in my discussion videos to help guide that discussion for myself. So I'm gonna copy the 5 questions down in the description box below, as well as put them on the screen here, and then I'll continue to have those questions in each of the discussion videos so you can kind of be reminded of what it is exactly that I'm hoping to look for in these works. So the first is, how is colonialism or neocolonialism discussed in the novel? What role does it have in the narrative? Question number 2, how are women featured in the narrative? Are they the main characters? Are they side characters? What is kind of the women to men ratio, if you will? 3, what are the overall themes of the novel? How are those themes similar or different to the previous novels? 4, how is history, particularly the history of families, discussed? And then 5, what are your overall thoughts on the novel? So as I said, those 5 questions will be my guiding questions both during my reading and then during the creation of my discussion videos. The third kind of logistical piece I have is that we also have an additional text in addition to the 6 novels I'm about to discuss, which is going to be New Daughters of Africa, an international anthology of writing by women of the African diaspora, edited by Margaret Busby and published by Armistead. So this is quite a hefty collection of pieces of short fiction, poetry, and creative nonfiction written by women across the sub-Saharan African diaspora. So several kind of the biggest name authors are featured in here, including, but not limited to, obviously, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, Roxane Gay, Edwidge Danticat, Zadie Smith, Nnedi Okorafor, really pretty much the vast majority of big name women of the African diaspora that are writers today and in the past are featured in here. So, and it's organized by the year in which the woman was born. So as you can see here, and it begins with Nana Asmahu, who was born in 1793 and continues all the way to include women who were born in the 1990s. So my plan is to read chronologically, and the chronological piece will make sense in just a minute, throughout this collection over the next 6 months, in addition to reading the author of the month's addition to this anthology, if she is present. And I will let you know when I talk about each book if she's present in this work. So now let's get into the 6 books that I'm hoping to read. So as I just mentioned that I would be alluding to chronology, I've ordered the books chronologically through time. So the earliest time period of the novel is the one that made its placement, if that makes sense. Several of these novels move through time, but the earliest time period that we have in the novel is where it fell in the placement. Hopefully that makes sense. Maybe it'll make more sense as I talk through each novel. So to start us off in June, we have The Dragonfly Sea by Yvonne Adhiambo Awor. Awor is a Kenyan writer currently living in Nairobi, although she has lived in South Africa and Germany. And this novel was published in 2019 and I believe is a dual timeline narrative set both in the present day following a young girl living on the island of Pate, which is off the coast of Kenya, as well as a merchant sailor in the 14th century from China who arrived to trade with the people of Kenya during that 14th century time period. So that aspect of the story is based on true events, and I'm not entirely sure how the 2 stories are connected quite yet, but I thought this would be especially interesting given that it's a pre-colonial narrative, so hopefully interesting to kind of add to our discussion of the history of sub-Saharan Africa. And then Aurora is featured in New Daughters of Africa. Next, moving slightly west and forward in time from Kenya, we have Kintu by Jennifer Nansub-Uga Makumbi, who is a Ugandan writer currently living in the United Kingdom. Kintu was originally published in Kenya in 2014 and then was picked up in the United States in 2017. And this follows the Kintu clan beginning in 1750 and continues for several generations. So I've heard a lot of booktube buzz about this one, so very excited to include it in the project. And this is the July book. I can't remember if I said that, but should have also been apparent. And Makumbi is featured in Daughters of Africa as well. Then in August, it'll be my only reread, which is Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi, which I read back in the beginning of 2017 after receiving this as a Christmas present in 2016, I believe. And I was planning on featuring only books that I'm reading for the first time, but Homegoing just fits so well with the kind of thematic elements that I'm hoping to discuss that I couldn't not include it in this reading project. So Gyasi was born in Ghana, but moved to Alabama in the US as a small child, and has since lived in the States. If you haven't heard of this book, I will briefly describe it. It follows the story of two half-sisters, both born in 1775 in Ghana, one of whom ends up marrying a Dutch merchant who is a slave trader, and the other of whom is sold into slavery. And then we follow their families through each generation until the present day. One of the timelines primarily takes place in Ghana, and the other of which primarily takes place in the United States. This is phenomenal, and it ties so well into so many of the themes that I'm hoping to kind of discuss in this reading project that I knew I had to include it. Additionally, and this is completely coincidental, but Gyasi's sophomore novel, Transcendent Kingdom, is coming out in September of this year, which I actually talked about in my anticipated releases video. I will put a link to it up here if you haven't seen it. So that will be a nice kind of preparation for reading Gyasi's new novel in September, is to reread Homegoing. Moving right along, in September we have She Would Be King by Weyotu Moore. Weyotu Moore is a Liberian author, although she left Liberia as a small child, like Yaa Gyasi, in the early 1990s due to the Liberian Civil War, and has lived in, I believe, New York City since then. So She Would Be King follows the creation of Liberia in the 1830s, and I believe has some elements of magical realism, fantasticism in there. And this one will be especially interesting because Liberia actually was never a colony. It has always been a free, independent state, and it was created with the intent to be a place of refuge for enslaved African Americans. And I believe there was a bit of, as you would expect, strife between enslaved African Americans arriving to Liberia as well as the indigenous people of the region prior to Liberia's creation. So I'm very excited about this one. I believe Lindsay of Lindsay's Bookish Life is reading this right now, and she seems to be really enjoying it. So really, really excited about this one. Then in October, we have Out of Darkness, Shining Light by Bettina Gappa. Gappa is a Zimbabwean writer who was born in what was then Rhodesia, that I believe is now part of Zambia as opposed to Zimbabwe, and that's where she currently lives, although she did live in Germany for a time. And this is a fictionalized account of Dr. David Livingstone, who was an early English explorer who died, explorer, quote unquote, whose body was carried out of Africa after his death by a number of African women and men. If you are familiar at all with colonial Sub-Saharan African history, Dr. Livingstone's name is probably very familiar to you, as he is often credited kind of within the history as being one of the main people that then allowed for the colonization of interior Africa. So this one I think will definitely fit very well into the prompts, and this one takes place in 1873, as that is when Dr. Livingstone died. Then in November, in the similar kind of Rhodesia turned Zambia, Zimbabwe area, we have The Old Drift by Namwali Serpell. Serpell is a Zambian author who currently teaches at UC Berkeley, so she lives here in the States. And this is a multi-generational saga beginning in 1904 that follows three families, one black family, one white family, and one brown family, which I assume is an Indian family. As I said, beginning in 1904 and moving all the way into a future timeline, I believe. Since this is the novel that kind of started this whole project, I'm especially excited for this one and looking forward to getting to it in November. And I believe all three of the previous The three past authors that I've just discussed are not in New Daughters of Africa, but Nemoli Serpell is in New Daughters of Africa, so I will be reading her specific entry in November. And then finally in December, we are reading a book that I actually won in a Goodreads giveaway that was originally supposed to come out on the 16th of June, but now seems to have been pushed back to March of 2021. So that is How Beautiful We Were by Imbolo Mbue, and if this happens to be pushed forward prior to December of 2020, I definitely will be reading it before its release date. However, that seems somewhat unlikely. Additionally, this one may be a bit of a challenge because I'm not sure if more intense editing is happening between now and March 2021, so this may be somewhat of a different version of this book than the one that eventually comes out. But either way, I'm still really excited about this one and still planning on reading it for this reading project in December. So this one, to my understanding, is a contemporary novel set in a fictionalized African country that I believe is somewhat modeled after Cameroon, which is Imbolo Mbue's country of origin. She was born in Cameroon and came to the United States for her college education. And this novel follows a young girl in a small village within this country that is fighting against an American oil company that is trying to extract oil in and around the village. So on the back, it says that it is told from the perspective of a generation of children and the family of a girl named Thula who grows up to become a revolutionary. So I believe there is some kind of multi-generational, or actually like several decades that are covered in this book. So it does have a bit of the historical bent to it that all the rest of the books do. And yeah, I'm very excited about this one. It feels very apt, I think, to conclude this reading project with a book about American neocolonialism, because obviously that is a huge aspect of like sub-Saharan African geopolitics, so it felt wrong to not include this in the reading project. And Mbue is also part of the Daughters of Africa anthology. Okay, so that is all the information I wanted to give you for this reading project, at least right now. I'm super excited about starting this project. As you probably can tell, I think it'll really help provide some important insight into a region of the world that I am very fascinated with and want to learn more about. So I hope that this reading project sounds at all interesting to you. I would love to have as many people that are interested participating in the discussions about these books as possible. Again, thank you so much for watching. If you would like to see more content related to the African Women Writers Project, please do subscribe to my channel. As I said, I'll be making those videos and posting them around the 15th of each month. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.